Hey guys, this is Tyler here. Just another day here in Mexico, Saturday. So I'm going to talk briefly how I got to Sioux Falls with about $250 when I got there 2 days before Thanksgiving. Like everyone here knows, or most people, I was absolutely broke, and it was really scary, honestly. I mean, I had everything calculated, and this was obviously on the notion too that I had a job lined up and everything. So that's all I had. Imagine that. Getting because people will say you need like 3,000, 6,000, 8,000 to relocate stateside domestically. I did it with $250. And how I did it was comprised mostly of a few main factors. Like the first thing was my accommodations. I found that the shelter to stay at, that's a huge expense. And that in itself actually will often for people nowadays in the US that might be more than half their expense is just simply where they're laying their head to sleep. Now, second thing here, and I know people might find this controversial, is the fact that I had food stamps. And yes, food stamps are available for everyone who qualify. And some people will say, oh, you don't need food stamps. Here's the problem. And yes, you could theoretically get away without using them. The problem is often is the logistics of having meals and having food prepped and everything. When you think about how the US is set up as a country, like if you're at work, if you're having to go from X place to Y place to Z place, you may not have the money to or the time, and it may not be feasible to get to like a whether that be a food bank or food kitchen of something of this sort. It may just not be practical, and this is actually where a lot of food stamps really help, at least temporarily, is if you have logistics that don't permit you to physically be at those places. I mean, if you work during the daytime, how are you going to do that? It's impossible. And also remember, where I was working, there's not a lot in those areas. When you look at like schools, there's not a lot in those locations. So you're going to probably have to order like Uber Eats or something, just some really overpriced fast food option of that nature. And for me, that wasn't practical. So that was another big thing. Now, also, I had my transportation really well figured out when I got to the US. Like, I knew, for example, I would only use Lyft or Uber if I had to get to and from work. And there were some days where I would just walk home from work. It was like maybe 2 to 4 miles. I would just simply walk home. I mean, I like the fresh air and everything, and that worked totally good for me. Now, another thing too was all those miscellaneous expenses that you sometimes forget about. Those, of course, weren't in the picture. I told everyone here at one time I was spending a lot of money on booze, like on a daily or weekly basis. It could most certainly be in the low hundreds. So items like that I wasn't buying were another big factor of eliminating this excess. There was only a couple things that I really splurged on. One of those things was like Starbucks coffees, but there was an ideal behind that. Yes, do you need to go in and purchase something and use their space, use their Wi-Fi? Not necessarily. But for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to spend how many hours? I'm getting work done. I'm doing personal projects. So I would go in and that's what I would do. And that was another big saver. But there were a lot of little expenses where I just simply had to forego. I could not spend on. And it was like, I'll give you an example of something you see a lot of guys in shelters spend on that makes no sense. Cigarettes. Think of how much cigarettes. They can be well over $10 a pack nowadays. No food stamp's going to pay for cigarettes. or of course everyone had their little supply of grain, or at least their supply they would use when they got out of work or when they weren't in the shelter. Stuff like that I obviously didn't spin on. So when I look at it now, I'm still stunned. $250, that's all I came to the States with. And obviously I made it work. And also remember something, I don't currently have access to credit cards. Credit lines are out of the question because of other financial problems. That's a whole different topic. Couldn't just use credit cards because if I could, that would have been a huge game changer. So that's just a brief summary here, and give me your feedback below. Thank you guys.